At 3:12 a.m., the 911 dispatch board lit up. No name, no ID, just a location that sent a chill through the veteran operator. The voice on the other end was a papery whisper, barely cutting through the static. "I think someone is in my house." The GPS coordinates locked onto 14 Blackwood Drive. The officers on patrol went cold. They remembered that address. They had watched it vanish in a roar of orange flame exactly 2 years ago to the day. Driven by a grim curiosity, they pulled up to the lot. There was no house. No walls, no roof. Just a skeleton of charred timber and a foundation choked with grey ash. "Dispatch, we're at the scene," the lead officer radioed, his breath visible in the freezing air. "There's nothing here." "Just the ruins." The radio didn't click. It screamed. A burst of white noise tore through the car's speakers, and then that same brittle whisper emerged, sounding as if it was sitting in the back seat. "They're behind you." The officers spun around, flashlights cutting through the dark. The lot was empty. No footprints in the frost, no movement in the trees. Then the lead officer's light hit the floor of the blackened basement. There, sitting in the center of the ash, was a 1990s landline phone. It wasn't plugged in. It wasn't connected to a single wire, but as they watched, the receiver lifted into the air by itself, and the dial tone began to hum. The static didn't stop when they left the lot. It followed them. Back at the station, the recording of the 3:12 a.m. call was played for the chief, but the audio had changed. Between the whispers, they could now hear a rhythmic thumping, the sound of someone walking on floorboards that no longer existed. "Run the voice through forensics," the chief ordered, his face pale. "I want a match." 10 minutes later, the technician stepped out of the booth, shaking. "I found a match, Chief, but it's not from the fire 2 years ago." He slid a file across the desk. It was a digital recording from 10 minutes ago. The voice in the 911 call was an exact biometric match to the lead officer who had responded to the scene. The officer froze. "That's impossible." "I didn't say that." Suddenly, his own body camera, which had been turned off, clicked on by itself. The feed projected onto the wall monitors. It showed the officer standing in the charred ruins of 14 Blackwood, looking down into the basement. But in the video, he wasn't alone. A figure made of soot and shadow was standing directly behind him, its hands hovering an inch from his neck. The figure leaned into the officer's ear and whispered, not to him, but directly into the camera lens, "I'm still in the house." The lights in the station flickered and died. In the sudden pitch black, the only sound was the 911 dispatch board lighting up again. Location: the police station. Time: 3:22 a.m. The phone on the chief's desk began to ring. The phone on the chief's desk didn't just ring. It vibrated with a frequency that shattered the glass paperweight beside it. The chief answered on speaker. The room was silent, save for the hum of the backup generators. "Officer Miller," the voice whispered from the phone. It was the lead officer's voice again, calm, cold, and dead. "Why did you leave?" "The floorboards are getting cold." Officer Miller backed away, his hand twitching near his holster. "I'm right here," he stammered. "Chief, I'm standing right here." The chief looked from Miller to the phone, then back to the wall monitor. The Bodycam footage was still playing, but it was no longer a recording. It was live. On the screen, the camera view showed Miller standing in the station. But in the reflection of the dark monitor, Miller saw the truth. On the screen, he wasn't wearing his uniform. He was covered in soot, his skin cracked like burnt parchment, standing in the center of the ash pile back at 14 Blackwood Drive. "Chief," Miller whispered. The chief didn't look up. He was staring at Miller's chair. It was empty. In the real world, the station was empty. The chief was talking to thin air. Miller looked down at his hands. They were beginning to crumble into grey flakes, drifting to the floor like snow. The radio on the desk crackled one last time. "M," the voice said. "That's when the fire started. That's when you didn't make it out, Miller." Miller looked at the station clock. The second hand hit the 12. 3:12 a.m. The smell of smoke filled the room. The walls of the police station began to peel away like burning paper, revealing the charred ribs of a house and a sky full of cold stars. Miller wasn't an officer anymore. He was the caller. He had been calling for 2 years, waiting for someone to finally answer. He looked down at the rotary phone in the ash. He picked up the receiver and whispered into the void, "I think someone is in my house."